I've taken hundreds of odd handyman jobs over the years. Nothing fancy. Busted tiles, creaky floors, leaky pipes. People call, I fix stuff, and I leave. That's the rhythm. Simple. Safe. But a few years back, I answered a call that didn't follow that rhythm. It broke it. Shattered it. And ever since, I've never taken another job in a house I haven't seen in daylight. It started on a rainy Tuesday. A woman named Meredith called about a warped floor in her hallway. She sounded polite, but tired. Said the wood had been bending and popping beneath the boards. Thought it might be water damage. I told her I'd come by the next morning to take a look. The house was older, sitting on the edge of a tree-choked neighborhood with no streetlights and long driveways that curved. Out of sight. Hers was the last house on the block, almost swallowed by overgrown hedges and a sagging fence that leaned like it was tired of standing. When she opened the door, Meredith looked like she hadn't slept in days. Pale skin, faded sweater, hollow eyes. But she smiled and thanked me for coming. The hallway was narrow, walls lined with faded family portraits. The floorboards near the guest bedroom were visibly warped, just like she said. I stepped on them lightly and felt a soft dip beneath my boot. That spot's been sinking for weeks, she said, voice low. My husband used to fix things like that, but he passed last year. I nodded and got to work. Pulled out my tools, popped the first board. What I saw underneath wasn't just sagging support. There was a hatch, metal, square, about 2 feet wide, set flush into the subfloor. The boards had been nailed over it deliberately. You know there's a crawl space here, I asked. Meredith frowned. There shouldn't be. That room used to be a study before we closed it off. I asked if I could open it and check. She hesitated just for a second, then gave a weak nod and walked back down the hall. I unscrewed the rusted bolts and lifted the hatch. A puff of musty air hit my face, thick with dust and something else. Not rot exactly, but sharp and metallic, like electricity or ozone. It reminded me of the air before a lightning strike. I shined my flashlight inside. The crawl space was shallow, maybe 4 feet deep. Damp dirt floor, wooden beams crusted with cobwebs, and then my light hit something. In the far corner, slumped. Against the wall was a doll, human-sized. Its arms were long and thin, fingers curled unnaturally. Its face was smooth latex, but the features were disturbingly human. Glass eyes, stitched lips, tufts of real black hair. It was dressed in a faded nightgown that looked decades old, but what made my skin crawl was the camera. A camcorder. Old. Early 2000s style. Sitting on a tripod, pointed directly at the underside of the hatch at me. The red light was on, recording. I didn't say anything, didn't move, just stared at the lens, then at the doll. It hadn't moved, but something in its posture felt off. It wasn't slumped like a forgotten toy. It was sitting, waiting. I should have closed the hatch right then. Instead, I climbed down. The crawl space was even tighter than I thought. I had to crouch low, one hand on the dirt for balance. The camcorder's red light blinked slowly. Steady. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. The doll sat perfectly still, but there were marks on the wall behind it. Scratch marks. Dozens of them. Some shallow, some deep, all in the same shape. Vertical, then dragged down. Like someone, or something, had been clawing at the foundation. I looked back at the camera and reached out to stop the recording. As I touched it, the lens rotated toward me. I hadn't moved it. The mechanism wasn't motorized, and behind, the lens where the corner had been empty just seconds ago, was a second doll smaller. Its face cracked, eyes half shut, and then they opened. I didn't scream. I scrambled back to the hatch, hands scraping against dirt and wood. When I reached the top, Meredith was standing above the hole, watching me. Her face was pale, blank. You weren't supposed to go down there, she said. I didn't answer. Just climbed out and closed the hatch. She didn't ask what I saw, and I didn't tell her. I packed my tools and left the house without billing her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those eyes, too wide, too shiny. That cracked smile. The camcorder. I convinced myself it was just a disturbing prop, some leftover art project from a weird tenant or her late husband. But then I checked the camcorder. I'd taken it with me. I don't remember grabbing it, but it was in my bag when I got home. I popped the tape into an old player. It started with static. Then the feed cleared. The angle was from inside the crawl space, facing upward, and it had been recording for days. People passed overhead. A child once. A man in boots. Meredith pacing. Then, frame by frame, it changed. In one shot, Meredith stood over the hatch arguing with someone. I couldn't see them, but their shadow stretched across the floor like a claw. Another clip. The camera now faced the corner. The doll was gone. Then it returned. Closer. Each cut brought it closer to the lens. In one, it was sitting cross-legged in front of the camera, arms on its knees. In the next, its face filled the frame. And in the final shot, before static, it showed the hatch opening, someone looking down. Me, I paused the video. My breath caught, because just behind me, in the darkness of the crawl space, was the second doll. Reaching. Dropped the camcorder and stomped the tape. But even after I destroyed it, I could still hear it. A soft whisper. Not from the speaker, from the walls. Every night after that, I heard footsteps in my attic, even though my place didn't have one. Soft tapping from inside the closet. My tools shifting on their own. Keys missing. I thought I was losing my mind. Then, one morning, I found a new hatch in my hallway, exactly the same size. Same bolts, same location. Only this time it hadn't been there the night before, and beneath it, as when I lifted the cover, was a camcorder, already recording. The crawl space below was empty, except for one thing. A doll. Not latex. Not plastic. Just hair, my hair, and eyes that blinked slowly. Too slowly to be real. I closed the hatch. Nailed it shut. Moved out the same day. I've lived in 5 different states since then, never stayed anywhere more than a few months, but no matter where I go, the hatch always finds me. Always in a new room. Always sealed. Until it's not, and every time I open it, there's a new doll inside. More lifelike than the last, closer to me, mimicking me, becoming me. And last night, it moved. It sat up and whispered my name. I was looking for cheap furniture for my first apartment, scrolling through Craigslist late one night, half asleep and barely skimming listings. Most were overpriced junk or artistic shelves made out of cinder blocks and regrets. But then, I saw it. Free upright piano, beautiful condition. Must pick up. Do not play after dark. That last line stuck with me. I thought it was a joke, maybe a hipster's idea of humor, but the picture showed a gorgeous upright, dark wood, ornate carvings on the legs, a polished lid. It looked old, but not beat up. I replied to the listing. The response was immediate. One line. Pick it up before sunset, address attached. I had a buddy with a truck and nothing to do, so we headed out. The house was about 40 minutes from town, buried in a wooded neighborhood that looked like it hadn't seen a trick-or-treater in 20 years. The kind of place where every house felt just a little off. The piano was sitting in the front room, already near the door, like they'd been in a hurry to get it out. The man who answered the door barely spoke, just pointed, handed me a dolly, and turned away. On the lid was a note, handwritten in shaky cursive. Do not play it after dark. Ever. We loaded it up, laughed about the weird warning, and got it into my place just before dusk. My apartment was nothing special. 1 bedroom, ground floor, beige, everything. But the piano made it feel like home. I set it against the wall, near the front window. I didn't know how to play, really. Just enough to stumble through a few chords. That first night, around 9 p.m., I walked past it and couldn't help but press a few keys. The sound was strange, not out of tune, not broken. Sounded perfect, too perfect. The notes rang clear and full, like they belonged in a cathedral instead of my dusty apartment. I played a short melody, nothing complicated, just something I remembered from a movie. As the final note faded, the air in the room felt heavier, like something had shifted. I sat back down on the couch and brushed it off. Maybe the piano needed tuning. Maybe I was just imagining things. I went to bed around midnight. At 3:07 a.m. I woke up to the sound of music. Faint, coming from the living room. Slow stumbling melody, the same one I'd played earlier. But it was wrong, off rhythm, dissonant. I got up, heart pounding, and crept into the living room. The piano sat in the shadows, still silent, but one of the keys was pressed down. Not stuck, just pressed, like someone was holding it down gently, refusing to let go. When I flipped on the light, the key rose back into place. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I opened the bench. Inside were some loose sheet music pages, old and yellowed. One caught my eye. The notes were hand-drawn, messy but precise, and the title scrawled across the top read, "For those who stayed too long." Below it, a line in red ink. It remembers how you touch it. I closed the bench. That evening I unplugged everything near the piano. No chance of interference, no TV, no speakers. Just me, the instrument, and a very cautious curiosity. At sunset I tested a few keys again. The notes echoed the same way. Hauntingly perfect, resonant, too deep for something that size. I stopped after a few minutes. Didn't touch it after. Dark. But that night it played anyway. The sound woke me from a dream I couldn't remember. The melody was louder this time, flowing, almost confident. It filled the room like fog pressing against the walls. I stepped into the hallway. The lid of the piano was open. Inside, resting above the hammers, was a photograph. It showed me, sleeping, taken from the foot of my bed. The door in the picture was slightly open. I checked my bedroom door. It was open. I ran through the apartment, locked the windows, checked the front door, still bolted. No sign of a break-in. But when I looked at the piano again, the photo was gone. I started sleeping with a bat under my bed. The next few nights were quiet. No music, no photos, no strange noises. I thought maybe I was losing it. Then I heard the whisper. Not words, just breath, coming from inside the piano. I leaned close. The sound stopped, but as I turned away, something tapped the keys, one by one, like fingers dragging across them. Had a friend over the next day, told her the piano had been acting weird. She laughed, said maybe it was haunted, but agreed to check it out. She played a few simple notes, then paused. "That's weird," she said. "This key's warm." She pressed another. "And this one's cold." She looked up. "You okay?" I nodded, but inside I was frozen, because the keys she played, warm, then cold, matched the ones I had played that first night. Exactly. I didn't sleep that night. At 3:07 a.m., the piano played again, but this time it wasn't my melody. It was something faster, frenzied, almost violent. I got up and walked toward it, each step harder than the last, like the air was thickening. The lid was open. Inside there were more photographs, more of me, cooking, watching TV, sitting at my desk, always alone, always taken from impossible angles. I burned them in the sink, watched them curl and blacken. Then the keys pressed again. This time they spelled something. The notes, the pattern. It was Morse code. I looked it up. It said, "Don't leave." I tried to sell the piano the next morning. No buyers. Every listing was deleted within an hour. I took it to the curb. When I came back from the store, it was back inside, exactly where it had been. Bench closed. Lid shut. A single key pressed. I called. The man who gave it to me. Disconnected. I drove back to the house. No one lived there anymore. Neighbors said the house had been empty for years, that the last owner went missing. All that remained. An empty living room, and deep grooves on the floor, scrape marks, like something had been dragged in and out, over and over. I moved out the same day, left everything. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still hear it. Faint keys, soft notes, from the hallway, even though I live in a new apartment, even though there's no piano here. And sometimes, just before sleep, I find a photo on my nightstand of me, reaching for the piano, smiling. When I retired last spring, I thought I'd finally have peace. My legs were giving out, my memory came and went, and the stairs in my house felt longer every week. So my son convinced me to post for a live-in caregiver online. Craigslist. Probably. Not the smartest place, but I didn't want to go through an agency. I wanted someone local, someone real. The ad went up on a Wednesday. By Thursday, I had one response. Her name was Mara. Said she lived nearby. Mid-30s. CNA certified. Said she'd cared for her own father until he passed. Her message was short and polite. She didn't ask about pay, just said, "I can help. You won't notice I'm here." That sounded good, maybe too good, but I was tired of living alone. Showed up the next day. She had dark hair, pale skin, wore all black, even indoors, and carried no bags, no suitcase, no ID. Just stood on my porch with a soft smile and said, "I'm here to take care of you." Her voice was calm, gentle. It made me feel safe, even though something about her eyes made me uneasy. Still, I let her in. The first few days were fine. She cooked well, cleaned more than I asked. She didn't talk much, but I figured that was just her way. She moved almost silently, never slammed a door, never coughed or sneezed or even yawned. Sometimes I'd wake in the night and find her standing in the kitchen, staring out the window, just staring. I'd ask if everything was okay. She'd nod once and say, "Just making sure." I didn't know what that meant. By the end of the first week, I noticed things going missing. Small stuff, my toothbrush, a bottle of cologne I hadn't used in years, an old wallet I kept in the drawer just for the memories. At first I thought I was losing my mind. Then I caught her just once, closing the attic door softly at 2 in the morning. I didn't even know she had the key. I asked her the next day what she was doing up there. She just smiled and said, "Sorting things." I checked the attic later. Everything looked untouched, except there was a new rocking chair in the far corner, old wooden. It wasn't mine. I asked her about it. She said, "It helps me think." At that point I should have told her to leave, but I didn't, because the next morning I woke up with my pillow perfectly fluffed, my meds already laid out by the sink, and my coffee, hot and fresh, waiting on the table. She was always there before I woke up, and I never saw her sleep. About 2 weeks in, my neighbor Janice came by to check on me. She and I had lived on the same street for 20 years, brought me soup when I was sick, shoveled my walk after snow. She said she hadn't seen me outside in days. I told her I was fine, that I had help now. When she asked to meet Mara, I invited her in. But when we stepped into the living room, Mara wasn't there. I called for her, nothing. I checked the kitchen, the back door, the hallway, no sign of her. But when I turned back, Janice was frozen, her eyes locked on the corner of the room, and then she turned and left. Didn't say goodbye, didn't speak, just walked out. That night, I asked Mara if she'd seen Janice leave. She said, "Some people don't like being watched." I asked what that meant. She said, "I was just making sure." The next morning, Janice's son knocked on my door, said she'd packed a suitcase in the middle of the night and left town. No note, no message, just gone. I didn't know what to say. I started keeping a notebook, just little things. Times she left the room, times she returned. What I saw, what I heard. After a few days, I noticed a pattern. At 3:33 every night, she'd disappear into the attic. At 4:04, she'd come down again, always exactly those times. I decided to check the attic at 3:45. Creeping up the stairs was slow work with my knees, but I made it. When I opened the door, the rocking chair was moving, but she wasn't there. The chair rocked like someone had just stood up, and on the floor beside it were dozens of small objects, my things, the ones that had gone missing, but not just mine. There was a bracelet Janice used to wear, a baby photo of a neighbor girl from down the street, a cracked phone, half a pair of glasses, all laid out in neat rows. I backed out, closed the door and locked it. The next morning, Mara was already in the kitchen. She didn't say anything, but she wore a different dress. It had the same pattern as Janice's scarf. I asked if she was feeling all right. She smiled and said, "Just a little more me now." That night I set up my old camcorder, taped it to the wall facing the attic door. I didn't tell her. At 3:33 a.m. I sat in bed and waited. I heard footsteps creaking up the stairs. Then silence. Then scratching, not on the floor, on the ceiling above me. I didn't move, didn't breathe. At 4:04 I heard footsteps coming down. The next morning I checked the tape. It was corrupted. Blank from 3:32 to 4:05. The rest played fine. I tried to confront her, told her I wanted her to leave. She smiled, then asked, "Why would you tell me to leave when I haven't finished?" That night I didn't sleep. I locked my bedroom door, pushed the dresser in front of it. At 3:33 I heard the attic creak. At 3:45 my doorknob started to turn, softly, slowly, but it didn't stop. I covered my ears. At 4:04 it stopped. When I opened the door in the morning, the hallway was empty, and the attic door hum was open. Inside, the chair was gone, and in its place, my notebook, pages ripped out, only one left, in her handwriting, making sure, making sure, making sure. I left the house that day. Went to my son's place 3 states away. I didn't tell him why, but a few nights ago I saw something across the street. A woman in black, standing under a streetlight. No suitcase, no car, just watching and rocking side to side like she was. Trying to remember how to walk like me. I shut the curtains, but every night since she's been closer, one house closer, still smiling, still making sure. I've taken every kind of job Craigslist has to offer. Furniture moving, house sitting, even mystery shopping once. It's never been glamorous, but it pays enough to get by. And when you're broke and behind on rent, you don't ask too many questions. That's how I ended up taking the dog sitting gig. The ad was weird from the start. It said, dog sitter needed for one night only, $300. Must be okay with indoor surveillance cameras. Do not open the second door in the kitchen. No exceptions. I figured it was a joke, maybe a social experiment or some escape room influencer thing, but $300 for one night, that was real money to me. So I replied. The address came quickly. No intro, no name. Just, be there by 5 p.m. Don't be late. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, suburban, and tucked between two rows of near-identical homes. But the yard was different. Not messy exactly, just untouched. The grass was too even, too flat, like no one had ever walked on it. When I knocked, the man who opened the door was tall and pale with a stiff smile. He looked like he hadn't blinked in a while. Thanks for coming, he said quickly. Dog's in the living room. Her name is Trixie. She's old, doesn't need walks. Just feed her once and keep her company. I'll be back in the morning. I nodded. And the door? He didn't answer right away. He looked toward the kitchen. It stays closed, he said, no matter what. He handed me the keys and left. That was it. Trixie was a big golden retriever, calm and gentle, barely lifted her head when I walked in. I gave her a few scratches, then looked around the house. There were cameras in every room, small black domes, tucked into the corners, blinking red lights. One over the living room, one above the hallway, another facing the back patio. The kitchen camera was centered directly across from the door he'd mentioned. The second door, it didn't match. The others. Heavy wood, dark varnish with no handle, just a keyhole, and no key in sight. I felt a weird pull toward it. Not curiosity exactly. More like pressure. Like something was waiting for me to ask, but I didn't. Instead, I made dinner, fed Trixie, and tried to watch TV. By 10 p.m. the house felt too quiet. Like sound didn't travel right inside. Even Trixie's breathing seemed muffled. Around midnight I heard it, a sound from the kitchen. Soft, rhythmic, scratching, like fingernails dragging across wood. I froze. Trixie sat up, ears low, tail stiff. The scratching continued, slow, measured, coming from the other side of the second door. Then it stopped, and 3 knocks followed. Not loud, just precise. 1, 2, 3. I waited. Nothing else came. I got up, moved slowly to the kitchen. The lights were still on. The second door hadn't moved. I pressed my ear against it. Silence, then faintly, and so faint I wasn't sure if I imagined it, came a voice. High-pitched, childlike. You heard me. I jumped back. Trixie started barking, loud and frantic, but only for a second. Then she whimpered and backed into the corner. I turned off the kitchen light and backed out. Spent the rest of the night sitting on the couch, staring down the hallway. The door never opened. In the morning, the man returned exactly at 8 a.m. He asked if everything was fine. I told him about the scratching, the knock, the voice. He didn't. Looked surprised, just said, "You didn't open it?" I shook my head. "Then you're fine." He handed me the cash and closed the door behind me. That should have been the end of it. But a few weeks later, I got a text. No name, no greeting. One night, same rate. Are you available? I knew what it meant, and I still said yes. This time, the door was already open when I arrived. The man stood in the doorway looking tired. Darker under the eyes, paler. Same rules, he said. I nodded. Inside, the house felt different. Colder, like it remembered me. Trixie didn't get up when I entered. Just stared at the kitchen. The cameras were all in the same spots and except one. The kitchen camera now pointed away from the second door, toward the fridge instead. I asked about it. The man ignored me. He left without another word. By 10 p.m., I heard it again, scratching, then tapping, faster this time, then the whisper, "It's your turn." I stood just outside the kitchen and stared at the door. It wasn't locked. I could tell. There was a pressure behind it, like air pushing outward. I raised my hand toward the knobless wood. Stopped. Then I heard my name, not whispered, spoken clearly, from inside the door. "I've been waiting." Trixie began to whimper. Backed out again, locked myself in the bathroom and waited until daylight. When I came out, the second door was cracked open an inch. Not wide, just barely ajar, like something had listened, smelled me, and let me go. That morning, I confronted the man. I told him I wouldn't come back. That something was in there, that I didn't want the money. He nodded slowly. "It doesn't want you yet," he said, then shut the door. Weeks passed. I tried to forget, until the scratches started at my apartment. At first, just tiny sounds behind the walls, then from the bathroom, then inside the fridge. One night I came home and found a new door in my kitchen wall. Same shape, same wood. No handle, no explanation. I called the landlord. He said the wall had always been blank, that I was probably just tired, I didn't touch it. But each night the knocks got louder. 3, then 5, then a voice. "It's still your turn." I moved out, left everything, changed my number, never went back. But sometimes in places I've never been before, I swear I see that door. In alleys, in basements, in dreams. Always closed, always waiting. And sometimes I wake up with scratches on my hands, like I tried to open it in my sleep, like I almost did. And I think maybe next time I will. I needed money, not for anything noble, just rent. My truck had a broken radiator, I was late on bills, so when I saw the ad on a job board at the local gas station, "Help needed, cash paid, no questions," I didn't blink. I called the number. A man answered. His voice was raspy, like someone who hadn't spoken out loud in a long time. He said he needed help moving an old freezer out of his basement, said he had back problems, said it wouldn't take more than an hour. Offered me $300 cash if I showed up that evening. I said yes. He gave me an address that didn't show up on GPS. Told me to take the old highway, turn off at a mile marker with no number, and drive until I saw a mailbox made from a tin drum. Got there just before sunset. The house looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. 2 stories, peeling paint, windows that reflected nothing. The grass was brown and sharp under my boots. The front door opened before I could knock. The man was taller than I expected, thin, wore a dark green coat despite the heat. He didn't introduce himself, just nodded at me, turned and walked inside. The hallway smelled like bleach and something sour, like old meat. I followed him down creaking wooden steps into the basement. He flicked on a light bulb that swung from the ceiling. The bulb buzzed, flickering once before settling into a dim orange glow. There it was, a massive white chest freezer, old school, heavy, locked shut with 2 thick latches, rusted around the edges. "That's it," he said. "Help me lift it onto the dolly." I asked what was inside. Nothing important. He didn't look at me when he said it. The thing was cold to the touch, really cold, like it was still running. But I didn't hear any motor, no hum, just silence. It took everything we had to get it up the stairs. It groaned like it didn't want to move. The metal scraped the wood with a shriek that made my head throb. When we got it to the truck, I noticed something weird. The lid was sweating, like condensation, but the air was dry. I tried asking again. "You sure this thing's empty?" He handed me an envelope with cash. "Don't open it," he said. I thought he meant the envelope, he meant the freezer. "Take it to the landfill past Route 9, he said. "You'll see a turnoff with no signs. Go deep. Leave it there. That's all." He walked back inside without another word. I stood there for a long time, then I drove. The freezer thumped once as I pulled onto the road. I told myself it was just the bumps, just a shift in weight. Then it thumped again, harder. At a red light I heard it slide in the bed. Then a soft sound. 3 knocks. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just kept driving, But the knocks came again. 3. Then silence. Then one soft thud like something shifting inside. I pulled over, got out, walked to the back. There was a smear on the side of the freezer, from the inside, like something had pushed against it. I checked the latches. Still sealed. I thought about leaving it right there, but I didn't, because the envelope had my name on it and my address, written in shaky handwriting. I got back in the truck and drove faster. The sun dipped below the trees. The world turned orange, then purple, then black. My headlights were the only thing carving through the dark. I found the turnoff. Gravel crunched under the tires as I followed the narrow trail into the woods. No lights, no signs, just tall trees and shadows. Eventually, the road opened into a clearing. I parked. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of air that makes you feel like you're being watched. I lowered the tailgate. The freezer was humming now, very softly. I grabbed the dolly and rolled it onto the dirt. That's when I noticed the handprint, pressed against the inside of. The lid small, barely visible through the frost, then a whisper. Not from the trees, from the freezer. Low, wet, muffled. Please. I froze. Please. Help. I stepped back. I should have left. I should have run. But I couldn't move. Then I heard it again, a different voice, deeper. Don't. My hand moved without thinking. Reached for the latch, another whisper. Not yet. I pulled my hand back. I didn't open it. I pushed the freezer into the tall grass and turned to go, but there were lights in the woods now. Flashlights. Voices. Hid behind my truck and watched. 3 people stepped into the clearing, dressed in grey uniforms, no markings, no badges. One of them touched the freezer and smiled. He followed instructions, one said. Another checked the latches. He almost opened it. They laughed. Not loud, just enough to make my skin crawl. Then one leaned down close to the freezer and whispered, "Not yet. Soon." They loaded it into a different truck, unmarked, black. Then they drove away. I waited 30 minutes before leaving. The envelope had exactly $300, but also something else. A photograph, black and white. It showed me, standing in the clearing, looking at the freezer, but no one else was in the picture, just me, and an open lid. The next night I heard 3 knocks on my back door. No one was there, just a small white tag on the handle. It read, "Return to sender," and the sound of metal scraping down my driveway. I used to do weekend work for a private library owned by a small college. Nothing major, just lifting boxes, clearing shelves, reorganizing collections. It was a side gig, quiet, good pay. Mostly older books, ancient maps, dusty first editions. Nobody ever checked out. The building itself was strange. 3 floors, but the windows on the outside didn't match the number of floors on the inside. The basement level always felt a little too far down, like there were more stairs than there should have been. One Saturday, the head archivist handed me a set of keys and said they needed one of the sub-storage rooms cleared out. No one had been down there in years. She handed me a flashlight. Not because there was no light, she said, but just in case the system flickered again. Her eyes stayed on mine a little too long after she said it. The room was marked Sub B7. The stairs to get there weren't the usual ones. There was a metal door behind the fiction section on the 2nd floor, hidden behind a row of fake books. I almost laughed when I found it, like some Scooby-Doo setup. Behind it was a narrow staircase, unlit, concrete, damp. The first few steps were fine, the kind of generic industrial stairs you find in older institutions. But after the first landing, the stairs kept going and going. The air got colder the deeper I went, and the silence was thick. I couldn't hear anything from the library anymore, not the creaking above, not even my own footsteps after a while, just the faint, repetitive echo of breathing that wasn't mine. I stopped counting after 12 landings. Each one had a rusted plaque. B2, B3, B4. When I hit B7, I sighed in relief. The hallway was narrow, lined with locked doors. I found the one marked 7C, opened it with the key. The room was wrong, bigger than it should have been. The shelves reached the ceiling, filled with unlabeled boxes. Most were sealed, some half open. Inside, Old film reels, voice recorders, notebooks, soaked in dark stains. One folder had dozens of black and white photos of staircases, always the same angle, facing downward, always ending in darkness. One photo looked newer, printed on photo paper, but clearly taken recently. It was a picture of me, on the staircase, mid-step, looking confused. Only I hadn't brought my phone. Hadn't taken any pictures. Behind me in the photo was a shape, blurry, at the edge of the frame, too tall, too thin. Its arm was reaching toward me. I dropped the photo and backed out of the room, but the hallway didn't end where it should have. There was another flight of stairs, unlit, descending even further. No plaque, just steps disappearing into pitch black. I should have turned back, but I didn't. The steps were narrower now, sharper. My flashlight flickered with every step, like it didn't want to see. I kept going. 2 more landings, then 3. No signs, no labels, just deeper and darker. Eventually I realized something terrifying. There were no more landings, just a continuous spiral downward. My phone had no signal. My watch had stopped. I wasn't tired, I wasn't breathing hard, but I felt stretched, like time was thinning. I stopped to rest. That's when I heard the footsteps, soft, slow, coming from above. I froze, listened. Each step echoed down toward me, but the light never changed. Whatever was coming, as it didn't need light. I turned and ran down, not because I wanted to, but because it felt like the only direction left. The walls began to narrow. Concrete turned to dirt. The air smelled like rot and dust. Then, far below, I saw it. A door, wooden, slightly open. I pushed it wide. Inside was a room, round, perfectly carved. The walls were covered in carvings, symbols, words in languages I didn't know. In the center sat a chair, facing a large mirror. The mirror wasn't reflecting me. It was showing a version of the staircase above, but with hundreds of people on it, all walking down, all expressionless, all looking straight ahead. I stepped closer. In the reflection, I wasn't alone. Behind me in the mirror was the shape again. This time I saw its face, only it didn't have one. Just stretched skin pulled tight, like plastic wrap over bone. It opened its mouth, and every sound I'd ever made came out at once. Laughter, screams, whispers, coughs. Every moment I thought I'd been alone, recorded, played back, overlapping. I ran. I don't know how long it took me to find stairs again. It all blurred together. When I finally burst through the metal door behind the fiction section, the library was dark. Night had fallen, but it had only been noon when I went down. I checked my phone. 3 days had passed. They told me I never clocked, that no one saw me come in, that the librarian I talked to hadn't worked there in over 10 years. I quit immediately. But last week I got a package, no return address. Inside was a photograph, another staircase, and at the bottom, me descending again. I drive delivery full-time, not for a major company, just one of those gig apps. I don't wear a uniform and I never ask questions. You hand me a box, I take it where it needs to go. That's the deal. The job's flexible, and the tips are decent. But sometimes you get a request that makes you stop and stare at the screen for a few extra seconds. This one just said, deliver package to forest clearing. Use GPS coordinates. Do not open. Do not speak. Leave it on the stump. Offered 500 cash. No return address, no client name. Just the message and a pin on the map about 60 miles out, way beyond the suburbs, up a winding dirt road that Google Maps barely recognized. Deep forest territory. I accepted, because of course I did. They left the package in a locker at a 24-hour gym on the edge of town. The code worked. Inside was a small wooden crate about the size of a toaster, wrapped in a thick canvas sack, tied shut with rope. There was no label, no stamp, no address, just a symbol carved into the wood, a circle with jagged lines through it like broken glass. Did I think about backing out? Yeah, but I needed the cash. My rent was due. My car insurance had lapsed. And part of me was curious. Morbidly so. I loaded the box into the trunk and hit the road. The first half of the trip was uneventful, just highway and trees. But the deeper I drove into the woods, the quieter it got. The road narrowed to one lane. Trees arched overhead like ribs. My reception dropped to 0. Finally, my GPS said arrived. There was no driveway. Just a dirt trail barely wide enough for a car. I followed it. After maybe 10 minutes, the trees opened up into a clearing. Dead quiet. No wind. No birds. Just stillness. In the center was an old tree stump. Smooth. Flat. Like someone had sanded. Height down. I parked. Got out. Lifted the crate with both hands. It was heavier than it looked. And walked to the stump. I set it down gently. Then turned to go. But something made me stop. A noise. Soft. Like breathing. Not mine. I turned back. The crate was rocking just a little, then it stopped. I wasn't supposed to open it, I knew that. But I stepped closer anyway. I leaned down, listened. Silence. Then, a voice. Soft. Small. Don't leave me. It came from inside. I stumbled back. Froze. Then I heard something else. Farther away, footsteps. Crunching leaves. Someone or something was coming. Fast. I turned and ran. Jumped in my car. Slammed the door. Threw it in reverse and floored it. Didn't look back. Didn't stop until I saw pavement again. That should have been the end. But the next morning I woke up to find a box on my porch. Same size, same rope. Same symbol. Taped to the top was a note. Return to sender. I didn't touch it. I called the police. They came, asked questions. I said I didn't know who left it. They said they'd take it. But an hour later, they called me back. Said the box was empty. I knew it wasn't. I checked my doorbell camera. At 2:17 a.m. something had walked up my driveway carrying it. It wasn't a person. It was too tall, too thin. Its joints bent wrong. The video glitched every time it moved. It set the box down, then turned to look at the camera. Its face was mine, smiling. The cops thought it was fake, some kind of prank. But that night, the knocking started. At exactly 2:17 a.m., 3 knocks. Then silence. I didn't answer. The next morning, my front yard was filled with footprints, bare too large, 12 toes each. That same day, I got another delivery request. Deliver package to the woods. Same location. Do not open. Do not speak. This time, the pay was doubled. I declined. That night, another box appeared. Inside was my own voice on tape begging, "Help me, please, it's me." I didn't leave. Now I don't sleep much. Every night at 2:17, the knocking returns 3 times, always from a different door, always followed by silence. Sometimes I hear the crate creaking open, and sometimes I think it's already inside.